Today on Think Smart with TMFG, Mike and I are going to be talking about the stock market is becoming more and more concentrated with a few really big companies.
I guess 5 years ago we used to talk about FANG, right? Which was Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google. I think the only thing that dropped out is Netflix has sort of moved out of the Magnificent Seven. Is it still in the Magnificent Seven, or is it?
It is no longer in the Magnificent Seven because we've gone from 5 to 7.
But so we replaced Netflix with Nvidia.
So it seems to make headlines that we've got this Magnificent Seven, and we've talked about it before. And the Magnificent Seven are all U.S., but they're also global companies. So Apple, Nvidia, Facebook, which is Meta, Google, which is called Alphabet now, Microsoft, Tesla, and Amazon are all in that group. And so the premise of the thought out there today is that they're becoming so big, they're becoming too big. So what I wanted to do today is just explore, is that taking place elsewhere in the world?
Because it's the Goliath companies of the U.S. that we keep on worrying about.
There was one point in our career where Nortel made up 40% of the Canadian stock market. Now that did not end well for Nortel or Nortel shareholders.
Yeah, I think it hit 42 at its highest point at some time.
So let's have a look. In the U.S., there's just under 1,000 large companies. Number one company in the U.S. makes up 5% of that market. The top three together make up 15% because there's three companies right at the top that are all close.
They're all shuffling between Nvidia, Apple, and who's the third in there?
Nvidia, Apple, Facebook, depending on the day. They sort of move up and down. Might be Google, might be Amazon, Microsoft. What's interesting, when you get to the top 10 companies, they make up a third of the stock market in the U.S. So you've got 1,000 big companies. The top 10 of those 1,000 make up a third of the stock market. That's concentration. So, Mike, in Canada, how many large companies do we have?
Large companies, about 255 large companies.
And what's the concentration like in Canada?
Again, very similar. The top company is about 5%. Top three make about 8% of the market. Then if you look at the top 10 companies, again, we're almost 1/3 of the marketplace.
And in that top 10 companies, you would have the banks and you would have resource companies for the most part.
Interesting thing is they're very different. U.S. is all tech, right? The top 10 is going to be all tech. When you move over to Canada, the top 10 is majority is going to be banks. Banks would take 5 of the 10. And then you'll probably have some resource companies and maybe a Shopify or something else in there. But it's very different areas they're going into.
If we go over to mainland China, they have 100 large companies. Number one company, 7% of the market. Top three make up that 15%. And the top 10 companies make up 45% of their stock market out of 100. Top 10.
I don't know what they do, but I can guarantee they're owned by the government.
Germany, not dramatically different. 250 large companies. One makes up 10%. Top three make up 25%. And the top 10 make up almost 50%, 48% of the German stock market. So this phenomena of concentration is all around the world. France, last one to look at, 249 companies. Biggest company, 10% of the market. Top three, 25. Top 10, 55% of the market. So you're starting to get the trend.
Yep.
So what are these companies doing? Well, one of the things that when you get big, it's much easier to grow by buying your competition, buying new technologies. So if Google sees a new technology, they go out and buy that company.
Yeah, this trend started back in the 90s. Remember when all the dot-com companies were being bought up like crazy? And the whole idea, someone invented something, they would just go and buy the company. Everyone's dream was to be bought out. And now we're not seeing, back in the 90s, it was buying small companies. Now we're seeing these mergers of massive companies together.
They're paying billions of dollars to buy companies because that's much easier than trying to build one client at a time.
Yeah, there's economies of scale in there. So not even to grab the technology, but just to go, well, one, to squash your competition. If you're in competition with someone, easiest way to take care of that is buy the company.
So Biggest concentration in any one country, Saudi Arabia. Their number one company makes up 80% of their stock market.
I bet it's oil and gas.
Good guess. So I went and looked at what are some countries with tremendous concentration. Saudi Arabia, top 10 companies, 100%. Denmark, top 10 companies, 95% of their stock market. And the Netherlands, top 10 companies, 80% of their stock market. So these companies are leading the charge, at least in terms of market cap and where a lot of the publicly traded money is being invested.
It's funny, when we talk about being globally diversified, you can see how important that is when you look at this, because whenever you go into one country, you're going to be sector specific, but every country is in a different sector. So that's why you want Canada and the US, because if you go directly to the US, you're just going to be a high-tech portfolio because there's the concentration. You go to Canada, you're going to have banks, you're going to have financial companies. As you move to different countries around the world, you're going to have these different sectors that are all important to having a diversified portfolio.
There used to be a game, and I think it was called Worldwide.
Yeah.
And you had these little pieces to move around, and they were planes. And what you would do is you would learn that all these different countries concentrated on different materials, different raw materials. And so you would try and build up these little countries in your empire that you were creating. And really the world has continued to unfold that way.
Yeah.
Everyone is specializing, and you're far better to specialize than not to specialize. Another thing that's happened is globalization and market influence. As the stock market becomes bigger and bigger, and we're moving more to passive investing, which may make up 30 to 40% of the market, these companies continue to play a huge role, because if you're in an index fund, you're going to own Apple, Microsoft. You're going to own all those big companies that we just talked about. You actually have to own them.
So does it matter as much where the company is located, wherever the head office of the company is, as compared to the globalization and who they sell to? So when you look at all of these companies we have now, tons are in the US, but they're all global companies. You know, Apple phones are across the world. If you go Microsoft, I'm sure no matter what country I go to in the world, when they turn on the computer, they're going to have that Microsoft logo come on it, right? So it's no longer, not as much concentrated on where the company's based, it's who's using the products.
One of the other things that happens when you do concentrate like they have, they can become highly profitable. They get tremendous economies of scale. Take a look at even our office. It used to be just myself as one advisor, one assistant. That's how it started. Today, we have 8 advisors. We have 11 support staff. We're able to provide more services. We're able to more concentrate. We've been able to drop fees down for our clients. We've been able to, I think, provide tremendous value and keep improving what we're trying to deliver to clients. The same is going on in these big companies. Now, a pessimist, we go back to that discussion, is going to look at this as horrible. This is too much. We're better to go back. We're better to go back to little stores everywhere. That's not progress.
I think when we started this industry, there was no such thing as Windows for computers. You know, just to put that in perspective, when we started, we used to have those screens of non-friendly dots and numbers that came up rather than opening a screen with Windows. And it's amazing. We take it for granted how far things have moved ahead in that world, and that's concentration. You know, you let Microsoft concentrate on that. They created great products. Whether you like the company or not, they've created new user experience that we couldn't have dreamed of 30 years ago.
And if they're not creating great products, they're not going to survive.
Yeah.
If they don't continue to improve, they're going to be replaced. We've talked about this time and time again. Just because you're in the top 10 years from now, half of them aren't in the top 10 anymore.
Remember when we started, what did we use for our spreadsheets? Lotus 1, 2, 3, right? You know,
didn't survive.
Didn't survive. It was a great program. It was okay, but it wasn't, you know, Excel. Microsoft was able to concentrate and put all these things together so they read for each other. And Microsoft created the whole suite of products that you can use. Lotus 1, 2, 3 was not as relatable with all the other products. They just didn't have the same offering.
You see Google. No one ever thought Google would be replaced. And I'm not predicting that Google will be replaced, but you're seeing what Nvidia and ChatGPT can do. It's a big improvement over what Google did.
Yep.
It's huge. So What we want you to accept today is globalization is continuing to happen. Concentration of companies is continuing to happen. They're getting their own specialties. They're becoming global players, and that's good for the citizens of the world, and it's good for our investors. That brings us to the end of another week. This is Rob and Mike with Think Smart from the McClelland Financial Group of Asante Capital Management.